All right, so about a week ago, 6 days now, July 24, 2025, Hulk Hogan passed away in in his home in Clearwater, Florida. Um, Hogan has been he's been one of the guys that you consistently always seem to see. Like, Hogan had another surgery. Hogan had to go get his back worked on again. Hogan had to, you know, get his knee cleaned up, even though, he hasn't been in the ring since 2012. Like, he's always been one of those guys that even after his career, he's always been having health problems, always been having surgeries. And I mean, even during his time in TNA, he was still always having surgeries when he wrestled, I think, like two matches for them on like house shows. Like, it was just, he was one of those guys that he was never out of it because of those surgeries. He never could just have his career be over. He was always still having to deal with the lingering effects. And we heard a lot about his health in the last couple weeks before his death. And I think this is kind of like the story of Hulk Hogan. Is that there was all this stuff going on, there was all these things being said, yet nobody really knew what to believe. Nobody really believed any of it because how could you? Because it's this Hulk Hogan and it's Bubba the Love Sponge on the fucking Bubba the Love Sponge radio show in Florida. Like, how are we supposed to believe any of this? It's Jimmy Hart, you know, saying Hulk's fine. Hulk's not clearly he's not fine. He's fine. He's fine. No, he's fine. It's just Jimmy Hart right there, man. Like, we can't believe anything these fucking people say. Like, and yeah, clearly he wasn't fine because now he's dead. Uh, it started. The first thing that I saw about it was when Bubba the Love Sponge said that Hogan couldn't speak anymore. That his voice was his trachea was so damaged that he no longer had the ability to speak. And I saw that the day before he died. That was the first thing I saw. I didn't. There was all this stuff that was being talked about and reported in the weeks upcoming. I didn't see any of it until after the fact. I saw what Bubba said from a Reddit post, and I was like, we got two factors here. I don't. We got the fact that it's coming from Reddit and the fact that it's supposed to be coming out of Bubba the Love Sponge's mouth. That leads me to believe that this is bullshit. And, the next fucking day, I was like, oh, then maybe that wasn't bullshit, because now he's dead. And, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with Hogan. It's not, it's one of the most fascinating careers ever, obviously. I mean, he really, he really shaped the business into where it is today, him and Vince, and the kind of hostile takeover of the territories and going global and going national. And so for those that, that aren't brushed up on wrestling, the territories is like, so back in the day, in like the 70s and 60s and or not this not the 70s was when I think it kind of turned, but like the 60s and the 50s and the early years, things were very much, separated. You had like the WWF was like New York, Connecticut area, like up there, Northeast. You had the Carolinas, which was the NWA, and like WCW area. WCW had an area, and like everybody had an area. And there was all these promotions, and there was these guys that worked their promotions. And, you know, Piper was up in the Pacific Northwest up here and doing Portland and Seattle and all that stuff. And Piper was the big guy up here in this territory. And so the whole country was kind of just like sectioned off. And you had promoters specifically promoting and putting on shows in, a group of 3 or 4 states and cities. And that was the territories. And you didn't go into somebody else's territory and do a show. If your territory was the Carolinas, you don't go up and do something in Connecticut. That's Vince Senior's territory. You stay in your territory. And, then they make deals. All right, I'll have Piper come from Portland and go to, Texas, and then you send me one of the Von Erichs or whoever, and we work deals that way, and we can, put stuff together. But it was for the most part just like, we're sectioned off here. This is how we do wrestling. We have our own shows. Everybody does their own shit, and we leave each other alone unless we want to, like, make some kind of a deal. And Vince McMahon, Vince Jr., when he bought the WWF from Senior, basically said, "Fuck this. I don't want to only run up here in Connecticut and New York in this area. I want to run everywhere. I'm getting out of the tri-state area. I'm gonna go run, in Carolina or Texas or Florida. I want to run everywhere. I want to be the promoter. I want everything to run through me in the WWF." And the reason he was able to successfully do that, or one of the reasons he was able to successfully do that, probably the most important reason, is that he had Hulk Hogan, and nobody else had Hulk Hogan. And Hogan before the WWF, he'd done some stuff in Japan, and that's when everybody, you hear about, oh, Hogan was actually a really good worker in Japan. Hogan, when he was moving good, he was moving fast. He could really get things going in the ring back when he was in Japan before the WWF. And, they kind of just did it. They kind of just took over, and they kind of said, we're not doing this territory shit anymore. We're going wherever the fuck we want because we have Hulk Hogan, and everybody wants to see Hulk Hogan. And then it, ballooned and spiraled, and the WWF became what is now the WWE. And Hogan was a massive part of WrestleMania becoming what WrestleMania is now. Obviously, the big match, the main event of the night, was Hogan and Mr. T against Orndorff and Piper in a tag. And having Hogan on that bill that was like, you can't replace Hogan in that spot. WrestleMania 2 was, I think, him and King Kong Bundy for the belt. People don't really remember that one as much, but it was Hogan versus King Kong Bundy in a cage for the WWF belt, the WWF title. And then WrestleMania 3 is Hogan and Andre, where Hogan does the big slam, and it was, and Hogan, the way Hogan has told the story over all of these years, and the fucking, oh, brother, he was 7'4", 600 pounds, brother. I didn't know if I was gonna be able to get him up, dude, and I didn't know if he was gonna lay down for me, brother. And he did the job eventually, but like I don't, he was this monster of a man, dude, and which is kind of all bullshit. Andre was never that big, and Hogan body slammed him before on other shows. They'd already done the spot where Hogan slams Andre, but it was WrestleMania, and this was the first time really that, or I think the first like huge example of Vince just like blatantly like lying, blatantly like omitting facts about stuff that had already happened so he could further his stories. And it was a lot easier back then because yeah, there was no way to go back and find that footage of Hogan slamming Andre, but you know, as the years went on and he kept doing it, and like we had the internet, and like we had an entire, we had a WWE network that he fucking made and created and said you can watch everything ever that we've ever done here in one place for $10. And they kept lying and trying to act like shit hadn't happened, that had clearly happened. So I guess that was the start of that. We can thank Hogan for that a little. WrestleMania 4 was the same match, they just ran it back. Hogan and Andre. WrestleMania 5 was the Mega Powers exploding, Macho Man and Hogan. And then WrestleMania 6 was Hogan Warrior, IC title and world title on the line. WrestleMania 7 is Slaughter versus Hogan when Sergeant Slaughter, who was supposed to be a U.S. Marine, defected to Iran and joined with fucking like Iron Sheik and Colonel Mustafa and those guys and became an Iraqi fucking like sympathizer or something, and then he won the belt, and then Hogan had to defend the honor of America by beating Slaughter for the belt back. WrestleMania 8 is Hogan versus Sid and Macho Man versus Flair. Looked like they're the two build matches, but it was Hogan versus Sid for the belt. WrestleMania 9 is finally the first one where it's not going to be about Hogan. It's Bret Hart and Yokozuna for the belt in the main event. Yokozuna wins, and Hogan comes out and says, "You know what, brother? I want a match with you, Yokozuna, dude. Come on, let's do it right now." And then Hogan somehow just walks out in the match. He gets into the match and beats Yokozuna for the belt somehow. So Bret Hart goes in as the champion. It's Bret Hart and Yokozuna. Yokozuna wins the belt. Hogan comes out for some reason and gets a title shot right then and there. He drops the big leg on Yokozuna, brother, and wins the belt. So for 9 WrestleManias in a row, we end the show with Hulk Hogan either as the champion or losing the championship. And WrestleMania 10 is the first one where it finally fucking changes. That's Shawn and Razor for the IC in the ladder match. I think Bret Hart and Yokozuna again. Or no, Bret Hart. Oh, this is Bret and Owen. Who's got the belt in WrestleMania 10? No, Bret Hart. Okay. Damn it. This is the Google overview. This is why I don't like using the fucking Google stuff. Because they gave me AI. Okay, here it is. So Bret worked double bill Bret Hart that night, according to this, which I don't know. I don't think that's what happened. All right, now I have to look at the Wikipedia. Now this is why AI is a problem. I mean, the AI could be right. I just don't remember right, but or know properly. But I don't think. Okay, I guess they were right. I guess it was Owen versus Bret. Owen beats him, and then later that night, Bret somehow is in a match with Yokozuna for the belt and wins the belt. Yeah. And he becomes the first to win both the Intercontinental and World title at WrestleMania. What the fuck are they talking about? Warrior did that at WrestleMania 6. Okay, whatever. But the point is that the first 9 WrestleManias are all built around Hogan. And Hogan's in the main event of all of them, even the one that he wasn't supposed to be in the main event of. He still ended up being in the main event of and winning the belt. And the reason that they were able to just keep doing WrestleMania is because of Hogan. They had Hogan, and nobody else had Hogan. And, eventually they around WrestleMania 10, they started phasing him out, and he goes to WCW, and we all know the story of him in WCW, where for the first couple years, and when did he go? I think he went in 94, maybe 95, but he was, red and yellow Hogan. He was 80s Hogan. What you gonna do, brother? Take your vitamins and say your prayers and fucking 24-inch pythons and all that shit. And it just didn't work. It wasn't the same. And then Bash at the Beach 96, he's revealed as the third man with the Outsiders of Hall and Nash, and the NWO starts, and WCW takes control, and you know, Bischoff to this day still fucking talks about 83 weeks, and how they were in the lead in the Monday Night Wars, the Monday Night Raw versus WCW Monday Nitro, and Bischoff still takes credit for that, and Bischoff still loves to tell everybody that'll listen about how they 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 led the war for 83 weeks, and again, Hogan had a lot to do with that, and we can talk about what Hogan did wrong in WCW, which was like pretty much everything else. I mean, from the finger poke of doom with Kevin Nash, where the finish where they want to put the belt back on Hogan for some reason, or we know why, because Hogan wanted to have the belt back. Nash had it. They were buddies, and so the gimmick is the match is that Nash is going to lay down for Hogan, and so Hogan pokes him, one finger poke to the chest. Nash takes a fucking crazy bump, and Hogan pins him and wins the belt back. And then Nash gets up and celebrates with him. It's like, this is fucking ridiculous. I can't believe my eyes. From the politicking at Halloween Havoc, was it 2000 or 99 with Booker and Jarrett, I think. I think it was Booker and Jeff Jarrett. And Booker was supposed to win the belt, and Hogan didn't want to drop it, and Hogan kept, because he had Bischoff in his back pocket. And I mean, Bischoff wasn't just the on-screen NWO guy. Bischoff was legitimately the guy running the show, and Hogan had Bischoff in his back pocket, and Hogan could do basically whatever the fuck he wanted because he was boys with Bischoff, and because Bischoff wasn't going to tell him no, and because he was the biggest star in the company, and he had the biggest contract, and he had creative control on the contract, and he could do whatever the fuck he wanted. And so when he showed up at the pay-per-view, he basically said, but brother, I don't think I should drop it, brother. I don't think it's the time. I think, you know what, dude? I think I'm gonna keep it, dude. I think I should pin Jarrett, dude. I don't know. I don't. Fucking ridiculous stuff that Hogan was pulling, and it never got better in that sense. I mean, so I know we're like 20 minutes into the video, and I think I'm just now gonna get to the point of it. Over the last week, everybody's talked about the great he did for the business and how important he is and important his legacy is, and the terrible shit that he said outside of the business, and then not showing any remorse for it, and the sex tape, and that was an entire other. Bubba the Love Sponge was involved in that too somehow. I mean, this fucking Bubba the Love Sponge guy. Nobody ever heard of this fucker before Hogan. I don't know. I don't know why this. I mean, this guy had a fucking job in TNA for a little. This guy, Bubba the fucking Love Sponge, was on TNA in 2010 because of Hogan, and that story is as insane as maybe any story ever with Hogan. How the tape got out, and Bubba the Love Sponge like just had it. It was like at Bubba the Love Sponge how Bubba the Love Sponge, like, it was something like somebody stole it from Hogan, and then like Bubba stole it back, and then somebody else came and stole it at Bubba's house and then leaked it, and Bubba couldn't find it, and it was something out of a fucking shitty fucking movie, man. That just like really happened. And then this tape is out there, and it's Hogan talking about his daughter, and we can talk about the weird relationship between Hogan and his daughter, and it's his daughter's boyfriend, and it's a black guy, and he's saying the N-word like 7 times, and he's talking about how if she's gonna date a black guy, why not one of the basketball players that like makes money and not just like a regular one? It's just like horrible shit. Just the most fucked up shit ever. And it's on a sex tape for some reason. and and it got leaked out because it got stolen from Bubba the Love Sponge's fucking house. And Hogan, it came out in 2015, and Hogan was back working in WWE at the time, and he had just left. He had, or maybe it was 2016, but I think it was 2015. He left TNA in 14 and went back. He left TNA in January of 14, and he was on WrestleMania in April, and it was, this big, huge moment. Hulkster's back, and he was back in the red and yellow, and he came out to the Real American, and he does this segment at WrestleMania with, I think it was Austin and Shawn, or Austin and Rock. It was Austin and somebody and Hogan, and they do this segment, and it's these three guys, and it's this big deal, and it's like for the WWE fans that didn't watch anything outside of WWE, it was like this crazy surreal moment, and for people that were watching TNA at the time, it was this just ridiculous sight that 3 months ago we were watching Hogan on Impact fucking doing this segment with Dixie Carter where Dixie Carter's begging him to stay. Please, Hulk, don't go. I need you. TNA needs you. We need you here. That's not gonna work for me, brother. I just have to go, dude. And fucking he leaves. He gets out of the ring and leaves. And Dixie Carter, who's the fucking TNA president at the time, she's not only the on-screen authority figure, but she's the real fucking president, owner of the company, is fucking holding onto Hogan's leg, hugging Hogan's leg like a fucking little child, begging him not to go, and he really fucking goes, and he's never seen in TNA again, ever. It's just over. The final shot of Hogan in TNA is Dixie fucking grasping onto his leg, begging him not to go, and then 3 months later he's on WrestleMania. It's fucking hilarious. And so I think we can talk about all the shit he said and all the racial and whatever else about Hogan. What I mean is that everybody's been talking about either the positives of Hogan in wrestling or the negatives of Hogan outside of wrestling. I kind of want to talk about the negatives of Hogan inside of wrestling because there was a fucking lot of them. Hogan in TNA, so for me specifically, in my wrestling fandom, in my lifetime of watching this sport, I know Hogan from TNA. That's what I remember Hogan from because I watched TNA as a kid. Yeah, I didn't. A lot of kids and a lot of people that I know that are, my age or around my age or, that aren't, they watched wrestling as a kid. They didn't watch it. They don't watch it now or, they maybe picked up recently because it's, gotten hot again. But none of them fucking watched TNA. Every time I bring up TNA, it's like some of them like remember it and they're like, oh yeah, that happened. That was a thing. I legitimately watched Impact week in and week out. I would watch Reaction, which was a show after Impact. So they had 2 hours of Impact, and then they had like an hour post show after Impact, where they would talk about Impact and they would cut more fucking promos because God knows TNA needed more promos in that era. We needed to talk longer in that era. Um, but Hogan was a part of that in 2010, and so he was there 2010 to 2014. He was essentially always like an on-screen authority figure, and once again, he brought in Bischoff, and it was Hogan and Bischoff, and they were running the show. Because this time they might not have entitled been necessarily creative team. They once again were in, they had Dixie, and Dixie wouldn't tell them no. And they had their boy Vince Russo was booking at the time too, and we know Russo's style, and that's another story that I'm not gonna get into the Vince Russo shit today. Maybe someday. Um, but they fucking ran TNA into the ground. In 08 and oh 09, TNA was hot as fuck, man. It was, they had Angle, they had Sting, they had AJ, Joe, Abyss, Jarrett. They had Chris Daniels and the Motor City Machine Guns and Nash, Booker T and Steiner and I said Nash already. They had Booker T and Steiner and their mid card was like they had the X Division, which was hot with Eric Young and these guys, and it was a really hot promotion. And yeah, they weren't coming close to doing what WWE was doing, but they were doing a million plus every week on Impact. They were making decent money, on pay-per-view. They weren't touring, they were in the Impact Zone, but they never really left the Impact Zone. They've always been a residency company. Um they tried to go on the road during the Hogan era and it really didn't work. The only time it worked was when they went to the UK. They went to the UK a few times and they did big numbers for those shows, but they never, you know, did much anywhere. They didn't do a ton in the US. They did house shows in the US and they did okay. I don't think they were complete disasters, but financially they weren't beneficial. Um, and again, Hogan was a big part of those decisions and trying to do that stuff. And so in 08 and oh 09, everything's going well. Christian Cage was there too. Christian Cage left, actually. He just left in 09 to go back to WWE. And it was, a hot point for the company. And everybody's thinking, well, I guess Dixie at least is thinking, well, we're doing so well right now. We bring in Hogan, it's just going to get better. It can't possibly get worse. And not only does it get worse, it gradually gets worse. And because they got overconfident that Hogan was going to do more than he did, and they thought we're going to compete on Monday nights. We're going to try and go head to head with Raw, and we're going to move Impact to Monday nights, and we're going to try to reunite the Monday Night War. But they weren't WCW because Hogan wasn't Hogan from '97. It was 2010. Bischoff wasn't Bischoff from '97. It was 2010. Even Sting wasn't Sting from '97. It was Sting from fucking 2010. If they wanted to do it, they needed to use the young guys. They needed to use the AJ Styles and the Samoa Joes and the Christopher Daniels, and Angle wasn't young, but he was fucking younger than the other guys. Angle and they had they got Jeff Hardy in 2010. Jeff Hardy signs in January after his WWE exit, where he loses the cage match to Punk, and then he's supposed to come back. That's not actually supposed to be the end. He's supposed to come back, but his contract expires. They don't get him a new one, and then he doesn't get a new one in time, and then he gets pulled over with a bunch of fucking drugs in the car, and then WWE's like, you know what, we're actually fine. We don't think we're gonna continue these negotiations, and so he goes to TNA, and that was like a big fucking deal because Jeff was one of the hottest guys in the world at that time. Like it was hard to touch the level of over that Jeff Hardy was in '09. Everybody knows that '08 Jeff Hardy, '09 Jeff Hardy, one of the biggest stars in the world of wrestling and the world in general. Um, and so for that guy to just fall into your lap and they just didn't. To be fair, he was on a lot of fucking drugs. So to be fair to them a little bit, the guy was fucked up, but you know, they still could have done more. And Hogan Hogan didn't want them to. Hogan didn't want them to use Abyss properly. Hogan didn't want them to use AJ. He didn't think AJ was good enough. He didn't think AJ, because it's Hogan. He's still thinking bodybuilders, jacked guys, 6'4", jacked dudes with fucking muscles on top of muscles. That's what a top star is, brother. Not fucking 6'1" tone AJ Styles who does flips. This guy's a fucking jabroni dude put this guy in the cruiserweight division, brother. This guy should be wrestling Juventud and fucking Dean Malenko, not Sting and Kurt Angle. But it was 2010. It wasn't fucking 96. It was, a real shift had happened that Bischoff and Hogan did not know what to do with. They didn't understand, and they completely fucked the company because of it. And after Hogan came in, it was never the same. The show was never as good. They never did as well in pay-per-view. They stuck around like 35,000 buys, 30,000 buys. Um, he really fucked them in the end. And then the way he left, obviously, with that segment and that being kind of the lasting image is that, Hogan was bad for the company. Hogan didn't help them in the way they thought he would. Hogan fucked them more than he ever helped them. And yet still, it's Dixie Carter, begging and pleading, we need you, we need you, we need him to stay. When later that year, they would lose AJ Styles because they didn't have the money to fucking pay him. They didn't want to pay. AJ Styles did not ask for a pay raise in TNA in 2014. He just asked for the same pay. And they tried to pay him less. And he said, okay, I'm fucking leaving. And he went and did this. He did the run in Ring of Honor in New Japan, the Demigod stuff, and Bullet Club, and then he shows up in WWE, and it was a massive mismanaging of everything in that company from the second Hogan got there. It feels like they never got anything right again. There was like a little bit in there that I remember that the show was actually really fucking good. And it was in like 2012, and they still had AJ and Joe and Angle and Sting, and they had Austin Aries, and Bobby Roode had spurted off into being a main eventer, and James Storm had as well. And Jeff Hardy had come back from the Victory Road 2011 thing where he was high as fuck and wrestled Sting, and Sting just had the death drop. And everybody's seen the clip of Jeff Hardy high as fuck in the ring in TNA. He'd come back from that, and he was sober, and he was fucking awesome. He was sober and in shape, and he was a babyface again. And he was having these killer matches with these guys, Aries and Rude, and James Storm had become a big-time main event guy, or he was supposed to have become a big-time main event guy. He was as over as a big-time main event guy would be, but Hogan didn't like him, brother. Hogan didn't think he was ready, so he only got to have the belt for like 2 weeks, and then they took it right back off of him, which was fucking dumb. But there was a hot little section in there, and Bully Ray had split off from Devon, and he was doing the Bully Ray thing. He was no longer brother Ray. He was Bully Ray, and that kind of, that was a great run for him, but unfortunately it kind of made him think he's better than he is, so now we have to listen to him talk about the bullshit that we have to hear Bully Ray talk about, how he's fucking, he draws money, brother, and all that bullshit. Like, no, you fucking don't, dude. Shut the fuck up. This guy doesn't know what he talks about drawing money, and he shits on AEW all the time. He's like, I know how to draw money, brother, and this isn't. It's like, no, you fucking don't. You never sold out fucking Wembley Stadium, pussy. Fuck you. That's beside the point. But the TNA legacy is how I remember Hogan, and the way he really fucked that company, and it was this weird thing where like he brought Brooke Hogan into the company, and Brooke Hogan was like the knockouts, which is what TNA called the women's division. They were the knockouts. Brooke was like the GM of only the knockouts division, which I always thought was a little odd. And then that was when they started the like, oh, Bully Ray and Brooke Hogan romance, and then that was how Bully Ray was going to take over the company with Aces and Eights, is that he was going to marry Hogan's daughter and become the son-in-law and fucking take over the company. And so they played that story in Aces and Eights, but once again, it wasn't, when Aces and Eights came up, it wasn't think about, let's just think about 20. I mean, it wasn't Aries and I'm trying to think of like young rising baby faces in the company at that time, and they didn't fucking have any. I'm like, I'm trying to, because it could have been AJ. AJ was the face of the company, but by 2012 it was kind of like that's established. We know Jeff was established. Kennedy was, or Anderson, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Anderson was established. Van Dam was, I mean, Kenny King. Maybe it could have been like Aries and Kenny King and taken, but no, it was Sting. Oh, you know who it was that was their rising fucking babyface? Magnus. It was fucking Magnus. They brought Main Event Mafia back, which Main Event Mafia was a faction back in the 08-09 run when things were awesome. And it was Angle and Sting. It was Angle, Sting, Nash, Booker, and Scott Steiner. And the gimmick was is they're the Main Event Mafia, and they're all former world heavyweight champions, and they're all fucking goats. And so in 2012 or 2013, I think probably 2013, they bring it back, but they don't have Nash and Booker and Steiner anymore. So they just have to replace them. And it's Sting and Angle, but they're baby faces now. They were heels the first time, now they're baby faces, and it's Angle, Sting, Samoa Joe, fucking Magnus, who at that point killed the gimmick because Magnus had never been a world champion, and Rampage Jackson, the MMA fighter, was in the Main Event Mafia. Also, had never been a former world champion at pro wrestling. I don't know if he had been a champion in Bellator. Um, and then that's when they do the big segment of they need another guy, and it's the August 1 warning. And the lore of the August 1 warning is so funny, and they keep doing these segments, and they're going to reveal who this next member of the Main Event Mafia is on August 1, 2013 or 2012. I don't remember the year still. I think it was 2013, but it's going to be revealed on August 1, and there's this big segment at the end of the show, and it's the Main Event Mafia, and it's Aces and Eights, and Aces and Eights it's like the NWO of TNA. There's just like 87 guys in it, and people keep leaving and joining, and nobody ever really knows who's in it at any one point. But at this time, it was Bully Ray and Mr. Anderson, and I think D'Lo was in it, and Taz was in it as the commentator. Wes Briscoe, Garrett Bischoff, Eric Bischoff's kid, and I don't remember if Devon was in it at that point. I don't think he was, but he might have been. But they do this big segment where all the groups are out there, and finally the August 1 warning is going to be revealed about who it is, and online everybody's like, oh my god, it's going to be Batista, isn't it? But Big Dave Batista, he's coming to TNA. Chris Jericho, maybe it's going to be Jericho. Maybe it'll be Goldberg. Is it going to be Goldberg? TNA loved trying to get people to think they were going to bring in Goldberg. And it was fucking Tito Santana. Or not Tito. It was not Tito Santana. It was Tito Ortiz. It was Tito Ortiz, the MMA fighter, the UFC guy. And he was bald. He didn't have the fucking hair. I guess part of the Tito Ortiz thing was that he had this like this like short blonde hair, but he was bald. So he just comes out. If you follow me on Snap, you've seen me post this picture probably 100 times of Tito Ortiz, arms folded, just fucking standing there. And that's the big reveal. It's Tito Ortiz, and who gives a fuck? And if there's one thing you should know about wrestling fans is that we do not trust non-wrestlers coming into wrestling. We don't trust any of them. They have to prove it. They have to prove it to us. Because wrestling fans spend, especially in periods when it's not hot, because it's hot right now, and there's been, the majority of the time it's not. And so when it's not, we have to listen to everybody telling us how stupid and how dumb it is, and how wrestling is gay and it's fucking stupid, and it's for kids and it's fake and all that shit. And so, when celebrities come in, it's like, fuck this guy. This guy's looking for a paycheck. Fuck him. We don't give a fuck. We don't want celebrities coming in our wrestling because, we watch it every fucking week. We know that you could put Kenny King in the Tito Ortiz spot and, build up somebody that actually gives a fuck about the business. And so you have to earn respect. You have to show that you give a fuck and that you actually want to do it and not that you're just some famous washout that's looking for a paycheck. And, unfortunately for Tito, he never fucking did that. He didn't do shit. He showed up like 3 times, did a tag, and fucking was gone. And Rampage Jackson showed up more, but he didn't show up a lot. Like, he didn't do a lot of matches. Granted, Rampage Jackson's not like, most people that hear this probably don't know Rampage Jackson unless they were watching TNA at the time or that they're, big MMA fans to the point that they were in depth watching Bellator on Spike TV fucking in that era. I mean, it was interesting and again, everything in TNA had to be connected back to Hogan. So all that stuff, I hadn't brought up Hogan's name. Hogan hadn't been involved in a segment for like the last 5 minutes of what I've been talking about. But because the whole thing was about Bully Ray trying to take over the company and marrying Hogan's daughter, it still all gets connected back to Hogan. And that was kind of the main event scene in TNA at the time. That if Hogan wasn't directly involved, there was always a connection to be found. And there was only a little bit, like I said, in like 2012, where that wasn't necessarily the case in the world title scene. And at that point they made the world title feel like it wasn't the most important thing on the show because they were like, oh, it's just, Austin Aries and Bobby Roode and James Storm and Jeff Hardy and these guys are just going out there having these great fucking matches and they're putting on classics and bangers and trading the belt back and forth between the four and just a lot of really good shit. They were doing 3 ways. There's a 3-way hardcore match. I think maybe Full Metal Mayhem, maybe, which is what they called their TLC matches, Full Metal Mayhem. I think it was, I don't remember what pay-per-view. I think it was Victory Road, not Victory Road. It was Slammiversary from 2012. It's Jeff Hardy, Bobby Roode, and Austin Aries in a 3-way. It's on YouTube. If you have the slightest bit of interest in wrestling, if you care at all about what I've been saying, if you watched any Jeff Hardy when you were a kid, please go find this match. It's on YouTube. Jeff Hardy, Austin Aries, and Bobby Roode. I'm going to pull it up right fucking now on my phone just to make sure it's still up. It is. Genesis 2013. Jeff's the champion. It's Roode, Aries, and Hardy in a 3-way. Okay, I don't even think it was Full Metal Mayhem. I think it was just a 3-way. And they started using gimmicks because it was a 3-way. Watch that fucking match. It's so good. And it was at a time where it didn't feel like the full pay-per-view is on YouTube as well if you give a fuck about watching a full pay-per-view. But the match is up on the TNA Wrestling YouTube. And it's been up for 11 years. They put it up a long fucking time ago. It's so good, and it shows the best of what TNA could have been and what TNA should have been. And then I'm sure if you watch the entire rest of the pay-per-view, you'll see why it wasn't so. Because I'm sure it's a lot of bullshit, and I'm sure Hogan had a lot to do with it. So that's how I remember Hogan, is TNA and him fucking around and him not being helpful for them at all. And we can, there's a lot of people have said about Hogan, but nobody. I kind of like being the guy that reminds everybody about TNA's existence because I will never let that company die. I promise you that. If there's nobody left on the earth talking about TNA, I will be somewhere as a fucking senile old man telling the people in the nursing home about fucking the James Storm Bobby Roode feud from 2012. I promise you that, man. I promise you that. I hate it when we tell the story. We tell the story of so many greats that worked there, like Angle and Sting and Hogan and Flair even, and we just ignore the fact that their runs in Booker T fucking always ignores his TNA stuff. And I just won't let it fucking happen, man. Hogan passed a week ago, and I feel like I've seen nobody talk about his time in TNA, and I just refuse to let that be the case because it's very important to the story of Hulk Hogan. It's very important, and it's very important to the story of wrestling because we lost what could have been a really fucking good company with a ton of talent, and it got fucked up because we had this fucking dickhead Hogan running the show and making it when it was all about Hogan, even when he couldn't wrestle, and his stories weren't as enticing or as exciting as whatever Daniels and Kazarian were doing. We had to focus on Hogan. So yeah, that's kind of the lasting memories of Hogan for me is the TNA stuff. Um, I've been going for probably 50 minutes now, so and I only have gameplay for about a half hour, so I gotta go fucking make more gameplay. So Hulk Hogan has passed away at 71 years old. It's not exactly quite how I envisioned my first video on the channel about wrestling to be. I did not think it was going to be about this or like this, but hey, here we are. Nothing we can do. This is what it is. This is the entryway for pro wrestling on the channel. And I appreciate you guys for watching and supporting. And I'm sorry I haven't uploaded in a week. I kind of got sick. I still kind of am sick, but I haven't uploaded in a week. I have to push through. I can't not upload. So, yeah, I appreciate it, and that's it.